I'm very pleased to bring our first keynote of the day to the stage on First Bell on-chain, the world's first natively tokenized IPO. So please put your hands together for Mr. Mark Kepeneghian, founder and CEO of Lise.
Hello everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today. It's a special time for us. So the Paris Blockchain Weeks is the best period for me to have this talk with you today, because we just launched at the end of last week the first worldwide natively tokenized IPO. It's on Lise. Lise is a new licensed stock market, and I will go deeper in that. But that's a big moment for us. So it's a 2-week period IPO, so it's still running, and it's a moment that we live today, and we share with you that is very important, because we all know, because we are here, that tokenization will change capital market and how it handle. But we need real use case. We spoke enough about tokenization. We are convinced, but we need real use case to show to the world what it really brings in use cases. And that's why we launched the IPO that soon, because in the US we discussed that maybe the first natively tokenized IPO will have arrive in a few years, but we decided, okay, we need to do it right now, because tokenization need it right now. So it was a very intense road that we took, and I'm going to explain how we did it and what it is going to bring. So first of all, Lise, as I mentioned, is a natively tokenized stock exchange. We are licensed as a stock market in France, so in Europe, but we are also a central security deposit. So we handle the share registry of the issuer that are listed on Lise, and that's totally new. You know, CSD are big companies like you may know, DTC, Euroclear in Europe, and it's pretty unique for a fintech to become a CSD. And because we are a CSD, we can do natively tokenized financial instruments. And we decide to begin with equity, because as a stock market, we can do equity, we will do bonds, we will do ETF, we will do derivative, and we can have a lot of use case, but we wanted to become and to begin with equity for a reason that tokenization, it's a very abstract technology for a lot of us, and to bring it to the market, we want to show how we can be the more useful possible. And in Europe, there is not a lot of IPO, but IPO is the fuel of our economy. You know, we are financing the real economy through IPO. A decade ago, there were a lot of IPO in France and in Europe, and because of our market infrastructure have evolved, SME are not going to the market anymore. And we want to change that. Tokenization can change that. So we decide, okay, tokenized equity, listed equity is the hardest thing to do, but is the thing that brings the more value. So let's begin by that, even if it maybe is the Everest that we are taking. That's what we wanted. So moreover, as I mentioned, we operate as the stock market, we operate as the CSD, but we have also a tokenized deposit. We are the only in production in Europe tokenized deposit, so real commercial euro that is on our market infrastructure thanks to a partnership with a French banks called Memo Bank. And thanks to that, we are able to have a stock market that is 24/7, and that's totally new. Also, I think we are the only stock market 24/7 in the world for listed equity. We have instant delivery versus payment. That means that when an order is executed on our market, the transaction takes place instantly. There is no CCP, and we are the CSD. So you go from a market that have T+2 or T+1 with a lot of intermediaries to a market where the post-market is instant internal. So what the effect of that? We reduce massively the costs, and because of that, we are able to serve use cases that are not going to stock market anymore. And that's it, IPO of SME. Because SME in Europe need fund. There is a lot of saving in Europe, but they are not going to SME. And stock market are the bridge, logical bridge. But it was maybe a too complicated bridge to be taken. And we wanted to recreate one, to become this bridge, needed bridge to redirect saving into SME. So we are going to do, and the IPO is going to do something that we saw a lot of time in the old time, IPO of a company, but in a new way that can change how things happening. So as I mentioned, we are the only stock market to do 24/7 trading. And why we wanted to be 24/7? It's because crypto showed us that retail and institutional want to trade on night, on weekend, and it helped also the stock market to accept persons that are not in the same time zone, because it's easier for them, of course. Moreover, we live in a period that there is a lot of crisis that you may know, and on weekend a lot of things happen. And we always thought that waiting the Monday opening and the price is going to change a lot was not the right thing. So we think that in 2026, having a 24/7 seems amazing for stock market, seems too logical for the reality of investor. So that was needed, first of all, and that's why we are 24/7. And it seems easy because 24/7 looks easy, but it was something big to become 24/7 internally, at least. But we're really happy to do that and to bring that to the market. So the second thing is instant DVP. A lot of persons speak about that, but to have it in production bring a lot of questions, and good questions that can show how market infrastructure can become less risky thanks to that. Because when you have a delivery versus payment on traditional market, it takes time. And this time make you take the risks of the settlement asset. That's why we have a settlement asset with low risk, like central bank money, a bit more risky with commercial bank money, and on crypto, sometimes EMT. The less period, the less time the delivery versus payment take place, the less risk you are taking. So the less needy you have, the less need you have to have a secure settlement asset. So thanks to instant DVP, we can change how market evolve and how the settlement asset is used. So that's why we decide to use tokenized deposit, because it's commercial bank money, it have fund protection, but because it's instant, you are in reality not taking the risk of the credit issuer, because it's a less than 1 second GVP. And that's something big for how market infrastructure can evolve. So that's the secondly. First thing, 24/7. Secondly, instant DVP. But more under the IPO process, we decide to change it. An IPO, it's heavy. You need a lot of intermediary to go through. You need a placing agent, you need a listing sponsor, you need communication. You need between 5 and 6 intermediary. It costs a lot, even for an SME. Fixed cost of an IPO with all those intermediary between 400,000 and 500,000 euro in France, 10 times more in the US. And after that, you have success fees. And all the process of the IPO is manual, not digital, and it takes a lot of time, 9 to 12 months. An IPO on Lise is a real IPO. It's tokenized IPO, but it's a real IPO. You become listed on the European stock market. You have an ISIN. You are on Bloomberg, real IPO, but it costs 10 times less in fixed cost, 30,000 euros. Because the market infrastructure is a lot more efficient, we are able to do that. You have some success fees also. And the process is 100% digitalized, and it took between 4 and 5 months. It became realistic for an SME, And that's it. We show how new technology can bring use case that was not here anymore. That's what we wanted to do. That's why we began with IPO and SME IPO. But the reality is, it's not that easy. We have to handle the share registry of a company. The company become entirely tokenized, because for equity is not a financial instrument like any other. When you tokenize a bond, you tokenize a bond. When you tokenize an equity, you tokenize all the company. It brings a lot of things to the market. You have to handle all kind of corporate action. You have to handle who are the shareholder, at each time. And you have to handle corporate action. That's something big. That we needed to prepare our market infrastructure to do so. But it was needed. And under the share registry, because as a CSD is something important, the CSD is the entity that say, okay, you are the shareholder, you are not a shareholder, have the proof, is the CSD. And under normal and old market infrastructure, share are what we call in bearer form in France. So that means that the issuer, the company that is listed, don't know who are the final shareholder. They know who are the custodian. And they can do what we call a TPI in Europe to ask, okay, who are the final shareholder? And generally it takes 2 weeks, it costs €1,000, and you have partial information. That's the way market act. And it seems normal, but it's not normal that you can't know who are the final shareholder at each time. So we decided to change that. We adapt, with the help of the French government and the IMF, the security laws in France, and we have identified bearer form on Lise. That means that at each time, the issuer know who are the final shareholder, even if they are intermediated. Is that totally new? And that changed a lot of things. It changed the issuer life, because when you are an issuer and you don't know your shareholder, you don't create link, and this link create value for all of them. Moreover, because of that, corporate action are very heavy. Corporate action are like dividend, assembly general, and the way it functions is like the CSD asks the custodian to ask the final shareholder. You have a lot of information, you consolidate, takes a lot of time, kind of manual, and it's heavy. Thanks to this new way of handling property, share property, we are able to do it as a CSD directly to the shareholder, even if there is a custodian. So we handle all the corporate action. And that's a lot easier, even for the custodian, because we want less risk. Moreover, about risk, it's happened rarely, but it's happened that you have settlement fail in market infrastructure, and you have sometimes semi-settlement fail. That means you executed your order, and because of technical issue, you received the share, but the seller did not receive the cash. Semi-settlement fail. It's awful, to manage. It's happened very rarely, but when it's happened, it's awful and it costs a lot. DLT, tokenization, make it impossible, because we have atomic settlement. We have one transaction, and in this transaction, we can swap the cash and the securities, because both are in the same DLT. And that brings a lot more efficient to the market infrastructure and a lot less risky. The semi-settlement fail is not happening on tokenization. And that's a big thing. So you begin to understand that we bring value to issuer, investor, but also intermediaries, like custodian, as I just mentioned, but also broker and trader. When you are a trader or a broker, you have your middle office and the back office. The goal of those two big costs is to see, okay, we just execute the transaction and we take 1 day, 2 days to receive, so let's follow the flow, let's make sure that everything is happening, and hundreds of people doing that. With tokenization, with instant DVP, there is no more need. When the trader executes the order, he receives the equity or the cash, it's finished, And so you win a lot of efficiency as a broker, and they will win the more. And that's awesome about good tokenization, because on the post-market, you unified the market infrastructure. So sorry for CCP, but maybe we don't need them anymore. Maybe in a different way, to be honest. But for intermediaries that are before the execution, they win a lot. And that's the thing. And that's why Lise work with banks. We have 3 banks as shareholder, and we are making sure that we are going to have a lot more because market infrastructure work with banks, are tool for banks. Banks are the broker, banks find the issuer, banks are the placing agents, banks are the custodian for fund, banks fund the retail investor. So banks are working with market infrastructure. So that's the key for us, bringing value to them. That's the enabler. So as I mentioned, we just launched the first natively tokenized IPO on Lise. It's still open. So for non-US citizens, you can go on lise.com and subscribe to the IPO, and it will be, I think it will make history because it's the first IPO on Lise. So, we are not opening a new stock market every year in France. It's maybe every 100 years. So it's a big moment for us, but also I think, and that's why we want to bring a big moment for tokenization in the world, And it answers a lot of questions because being in production show the real struggle, the real thing. And he showed us what we need to do to make sure we are going to scale. And that's the next step. So how we are going to scale? That's the first IPO. We have a lot of other SME coming to the market in France and in Europe in a few months. We want to have 2 IPO per month in 2 years. That's big for France, to be honest. In parallel of that, we are going to do other financial instruments. We want to do bonds, but also ETF. ETF are listed products, and ETF, are the preferred fund form for retail and institutional investor today. But because ETF are a lot retail, 24/7 is needed on ETF. We maybe all have ETF, and maybe you all try to buy an ETF on weekend, not happening. And that's something big because with 24/7 we increase the distribution of ETF, and all the ETF game is about distribution. So 24/7 is needed on ETF, and that's something that will happen hopefully in a few months on Lise. Derivative, they have a big struggle about margin call. Margin call under the post market, there is transfer of cash every day because of that, and T+2, T+1 make it hard. With instant DVP, margin call 100 times easier. So bring a lot of value. And finally, we see that every financial instrument, we have kind of different use cases, but we will learn a lot with tokenization. And so we are all convinced of that, but we wanted to show to the world with a real production project because discussions are over. We don't need discussion anymore. We need real production project. So that's why we launched the IPO. We are very pleased to be the first one. It's rare that in France we are the first one, and so we are pleased to that. But we really want to make sure that we will bring this to the market to make sure that every other jurisdiction bring tokenization into the topic, and that's the key. I can give you an example and what we wanted to do. When Nasdaq was created, they bring a new technology and they become the best to operate it. And because of that, they operated Nasdaq in the US, but they also licensed their technology to kind of all small, medium, and sometimes big stock market around the world. And that's interesting move. Lise want to provide this in-production technology to smaller stock market that want to go into tokenization. But also, let's take an example. If you are a small country in Africa, you don't have a capital market infrastructure, zero stock market. Is the way to create one. Because create an old one, too costly, too difficult to operate. With tokenization, you are able to have a capital market. So it will change also the way that small economy interact with capital market, and we connect the dots that we all need. So a bit ambitious for fintech like us for today, but tokenization open up a lot of possibility, and that's what we wanted to bring with the first IPO. Last thing, I didn't mention that, we decided to finance an SME in defense space, because SME need capital, but defense need funding. And so the first SME that is doing the IPO on Lise is ST Group. It's a defense company. And because of that, we show that we answer a real problem and an actual problem. That defense company all over the world need capital to make sure we can answer to the new problematic that we are living. Thank you so much.
Welcome to Signal Week.